Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Yom Kippur in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning now Mirz Hashem Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. We pick up on the very bottom of Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, Siman Taf Reish Yud Gimel Sif Hey. We're continuing to learn about the Isser Rechitza, the prohibition to wash or bathe on Yom Kippurim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Hey. If somebody wants to go out to the Beis HaMedrash to learn Torah, or he's going to greet his father, he's going to visit his parent, or he's going to visit his Rebbe, or somebody else who's greater than him in Torah wisdom, or he's going out for some other mitzvah on Yom Kippurim, he's allowed to go into the water if he has to cross, if he has to traverse a brook or a stream. He's allowed to go into water up to his neck, bein bahalicha, bein bachazara, and he's allowed to do this both on the way when he's traveling for the mitzvah, to the mitzvah, like he's going to his Rebbe. He's also allowed to do this to return home from his Rebbe, and he doesn't have to worry about the Isser of Rechitza. Ubelvad, however, there is a caveat here that the Mechaber says, Ubelvad shelo yotzi yadav mitachas fas chalukai, he should not put his hand under his garment to the bottom of the garment, lahagbia shulei chalukai, to lift up the bottom of his garment al zroyoi, up onto his arms. So in other words, the way I'm imagining this, I'm imagining that in the time of the Mechaber, they wore like a long cloak. So either it means just simply to take the hands down to the bottom of the cloak and lift up the cloak, to lift it up out of the water so that you're holding the bottom of the cloak up on your arms, or it might actually mean to take your hand out of the sleeve. You see, because the lashon of the Mechaber over here is shelo yotzi yadav. He shouldn't remove his hands mitachas vas chalukai, underneath the edge of the cloak. So that to me might mean pulling your arm out of the sleeve, so now your arm is inside the cloak, extending your arm down to the bottom, and then coming out to the outside and lifting it up. Now the garment really is resting on your arms. The Mechaber says you cannot do that, and we'll see why momentarily in the Mishnah Berurah, but let's just finish the Mechaber on this sif already. He gives us another caveat over here. You could only do this if the water is not swiftly running water. Dimkain, if it is swiftly running water, then af b'choil aser, then to traverse such a stream would even be forbidden during the week, v'get Yom Kippur, mipnei sakana, because of the danger of going into a swiftly running stream where the current could chas v'chalila take you. Afilu em eina magiyim ela ad masnayim. That would usually be aser, even if the water only goes up a little bit over your waist. You're not allowed. It's very interesting. People don't realize these halachas. You're not allowed to put yourself in sakana. So to go traverse a quickly running stream, what right do you have to put yourself in sakana? Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ice cotton yud beis. Lahakbil pnei aviv or rabbi. If somebody is going to greet his parent or his rebbe, v'davka kishe'en loy derech acheres lahagia sham lemechayz cheftzai. However, this heter of going into the water, despite the Isser Rechitza on Yom Kippurim, is only if this is the only way you can get to your destination. Where this will be discussed in greater detail. Someone's going to greet either his father or his Rebbe, or the Mechaber said, Misha Gadol Mimenu B'Chachma, somebody who's greater than him in Chachmas HaTorah. If he's going to greet his father, so that's a mitzvah of Kibbud Av. If he's going to greet his Rebbe, so then there's also, first of all, there's a mitzvah to go visit your Rebbe on the Regel, on Shabbos, on Rosh Chodesh, or on a Regel. There's a distinct mitzvah to go to your Rebbe, and Yom Kippur is included in that. Also, if you're going to a Rebbe, you'll go learn Torah from the Rebbe. There's also a mitzvah to go to somebody, Misha Gadol Mimenu B'Chachma, even if it's not your Rebbe, but let's say it's a Chavrusa that you learn with, and he's bigger than you are, he has more Torah knowledge than you, so then you're going to learn from him. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Yud Gimel, aval b'shavin, but if it's a peer, if it's somebody that you're on the same level as, also, then that would be forbidden on Yom Kippurim. Ice cut in Yudalid, Yochel Lavar, you're allowed to traverse a stream, and we do not have to concern ourselves with the Isser Rechitza. Even though you are going into the water, we don't have to worry about an Isser Rechitza. Why? First of all, you're doing this for mitzvah purposes. You're not doing this at all. You're not thinking to yourself, oh wow, I'm going to go swimming, I'm going to cool off in the stream. That's not what you're doing. And you're not going swimming. Let's be clear about that. You're not allowed to swim through the stream. What you're doing is you're walking through the stream. And by the way, that's why the Mechaber says you're allowed to do this ad savaroi, up until your neck. The reason you're not allowed to go in if the water is any higher than that is because now you're going to take your feet off the ground and now you're going to swim. And you're not allowed to swim on Yom Kippurim. That's a gzera, that's a takanos chachamim. You're not allowed to go swimming. Shema yasu, maybe you'll make a what's it called? A chavish shel shayotin. You might go and fashion a keli. You might make something like a life preserver. And that would be usher. You wouldn't be allowed to make that keli on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. So swimming, you're not allowed to do. We're talking about walking through the water. But the Yisra Rechitza is not a problem because this is not at all a Rechitza Shal Tainud. You're doing this to get to your Rebbe or to get to your father. Ois Katan Tesvav, the Mechaber told us that this is mutter both on the way to the Rebbe or to the father or to the Chavrusa that's Gadol Mimenu B'Chachma, or on the way back. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, why is this mutter for the way back? Dim loikein, because if we're not going to be matter you to come back, ata machshiloi la'asid lavai, then we're going to be machshil people for the future. Shalo yirtza shuv leilech. Next time around, the person won't go to his Rebbe on Yom Kippurim. He'll say to himself, Mali l'tzar azois. I'm not going to go to my Rebbe on Yom Kippur to then find out that I'm not allowed to turn around and come back home until Matzah Yom Kippur. So therefore, we allow him even to come home. Ice cut tezayin, you're not allowed to put your arms to the bottom of the garment to elevate the garment out of the water and hold it up on your arms. Al zroyai. Why is this? What's the problem with this? So there's more than one reason, but the reason the Mishnah Berurah brings down here is dal yedei zeh einoy nireh kemalbush. As long we're assuming that this person is walking out, he's going through Rosh Hashanah to go get his Rebbe. Now, certainly there's an Isser of Haitzah. You're not allowed to carry. So as long as his clothing is a malbush, as long as it's a garment that he's wearing, derech levisha, so then there's no problem of Haitzah. But if he's going to lift up the garment and hold it out of the water, now, says the Mishnah Berurah, now it's no longer a malbush, or at least the words that the Chavetz Chaim uses, it no longer looks like it's a malbush, rather it looks like he's carrying his garment, and that could cause a problem of Haitzah on Yom Kippurim. V'amar hayoytze betalas mikupelas b'Shabbos chayv chatos. If somebody goes out with a beged kafel, if somebody folds up his garment and holds it on Shabbos and goes that way in the Rosh Hashanah, it's an Issa Daraisa of Haitzah, he would be chayv to bring a karban chatos. Ice cut in Yud Zayin, to go into swiftly running water is Asar ad Masnayim, until the waist, lavdafka. This is not 100% precise. Elama'at lamayla mehem. The Isser applies when you go into water that's slightly above the waist. Okay, now we go to Sivav. Ha dishari lavar begufay b'mayim l'dvar mitzvah. This heter that we have to go into water, to pass through water for mitzvah purposes, dafka lavar begufay b'mayim atzman. This heter is only to actually go with your body into the water, to go walk through the water. Aval lavar b'svina ketana, but to go on some kind of a small raft on top of the water, yesh mi she'oser. It brings down over here, there are those that aser to do that. And why is this? Well, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Ches, Avalavar, to go on a small craft, like on a raft, that's aser. Why? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Derechitza she'ena asura elo b'yom kippurim hitiru. When it comes to the Isser Rechitza, the Isser Rechitza is an Isser that pertains only to Yom Kippurim. We don't have really an Isser Rechitza on Shabbos and Yom Tov. We do have Gzeres about Rechitza B'chamin, Rechitza Kol Gufay, but just plain Rechitza to pass through water on Shabbos, we don't have such an Isser. Ava Loshut, but to float, to swim, the Asar B'chol Shabsais Hashana, there's a Takanas Chachamim, there's a Gzera against swimming on every Shabbos of the entire year. Loi Hitiru, that they were not matir. V'oi de Rechitza Shani, just the Isser of Rechitza is different. Sheyochal Asais Al Yedei Shinoi. When it comes to the Rechitza, the person who's traversing the stream in order to get to his Rebbe, while technically he's walking through a stream and he is accomplishing Rechitza, he's doing it with a Shinoi. What's the Shinoi? If he was going into the water to do Rechitza, he wouldn't be walking through with his garment on him in the typical fashion. At least he would lift it up. But now we're telling him he's not even allowed to lift his garment up. So there's a hecker that what he's doing is not for Rechitza purposes. Ma'ashe'enken b'shita, contrast that to the question of swimming, she'en yochal lasais hecker sham. There is no hecker that we're making. V'yesh gzeirot shemiyaseh chavash shel shayotin lashot aleha. So if we're going to allow somebody to go on some kind of a raft or to swim, then we have the Gzeres Chachamim Shemayase Chavash Shel Shayotin. Va'afilu eino akim amalicha isa malecha bezeh ba'avur Yisrael kamkein ein lahakil. Even if you want to go on some kind of a ferry, you have one of these little rafts where the ferryman, runs the raft back and forth from one riverbank to the other riverbank, and even if there are other people on it, and he's not doing any malacha distinctly because of you, it's usher anyway because of this gzera against shayotin, the gzera against swimming, shemayase chavash shel shayotin. I was cutting your test with svina ketana. You're not allowed to go on some kind of a small raft. The choshekei loshut mamish to usher, and certainly swimming itself is usher. Okay, says the Mechaber of Zayin. So we've seen that a Talmud is allowed to go visit the Rebbe, and he's allowed to go traverse a stream and go through water despite the Yisur Rechitza to visit his Rebbe. How about vice versa? Is the Rebbe allowed to go to the Talmud? Says the Mechaber of Zayin, Harav asar lavar b'mayim kedei leilech etzel talmidoi. The Rebbe is not allowed to go traverse through water and somewhat transgress the Yisur Rechitza in order to go to his Talmud. Says the Mishnah is Katan Chav, Ayin Le'el B'Siman Shin Aleph B'Mishnah Siv Katan Yod Aleph, where this is discussed in greater detail. Siv Ches. Ha'hoilech lishmar peirosav. Let's say somebody has a field, he has an apple orchard, and he knows that the apples are already ripe and they're ready for picking, and he wants to go to his apple orchard simply to guard his apples. He's afraid people are going to come steal all his apples. So ha'hoilech lishmar peirosav is somebody who's going to guard his produce. Mutar lavar b'mayim, he's allowed to pass through the water b'halicha in order to go there to guard his peiros. Avaloi b'chazara, but he's not allowed to return from doing this on Yom Kippur if he has to go through water. Ais katan chaf aleph in the Mishnah Berurah, b'halicha, we're matter him to go through the water on the way to his orchard, mishum hefsid mammon. And this is the Chazal want matter this because they recognize the hefsid mammon. And again, it's first of all, it's not a rechitza shal tainug. It's a rechitza that has nothing to do with pleasure. He's doing it to protect himself against a hefsid. So really, it's not aser. So we're matter him to go on the way there. Says the Ramah, Hagah. In any of these cases where we say that you're allowed to pass through water on Yom Kippurim, says the Ramah, even if really there's another way to go, even if there is a way to go over land, mutar lavar, he's allowed to go cross through the water. The lamayit behiluch adif tvei. So the case that the Ramah is discussing here, what if somebody knows that a half a mile upstream there's a little bridge and he could walk over a bridge to get over the stream? Instead instead of walking through the water against the Isser Rechitza on Yom Kippurim? Is he mechuyev to walk a half a mile upstream? Says the Rama, no, Adarabba. He should cross over here through the water, because that's better than walking the extra half a mile. Because the walking the extra half a mile is a tircha yisera. Why are you doing such a tircha on Yom Kippurim if instead you could just walk through the water? Says the Mishnah Chav Beis, not everybody agrees with this. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, the Achronim, they agree, the mutaf lahakif, that Adarabba, it is better to walk the greater distance, v'loy lavar, and not to go through the water. Siftes, says the Mechaber, Asar lehitstanein betit lach, imhu teifeach almanas lahatfiach. What if it's very, very hot outside, and what a person wants to do is, there's some moist mud, and what he wants to do is he wants to put some of it on himself in order to cool himself down. He knows he's not allowed to wash, so he's not going to take cold water and wash his face with cold water, but he has this mud. He figures he could cool himself off using this mud. So the Mechaber says this is forbidden if the mud is wet to the degree if you could touch the mud and then the wetness from the mud you could transfer somewhere else and that wetness will be there. Let's say if you touch the mud, your hand will be wet, and now you put your hand on your forehead will be wet. So it's teifeach, it's wet, amanas lahatfiach, to the extent where it could wet another surface, then this is forbidden because this is rechitza. Then it means that you're putting something on your body that's wet, and that's rechitza, that's a problem. Says the Mishnah Chav Gimel, Lach, you have moist mud. Lav dafka biyodayim. We're not only talking here about the hands, ela afilu leishev, even to sit on this moist mud. V'atam, and the reason why this is usher is, since the mud is wet to the degree where it could wet another surface, and that surface will have wetness on it that you could feel, over alachluchis, that wetness is going to pass through his begadim, umisane, and he will have pleasure, ulahachi aser. This now becomes a rechitza shel tainug. You're washing yourself with cool water in order to cool off. That's a rechitza shel tainug. Continues the Mechaber, va'aser lehitstanein bekelim sheyesh bahem mayim. You're not allowed to cool yourself off using, let's say, a water bottle that has water in it. You're not allowed to cool yourself off using kelim that have water in them or other liquids. Even if they're not full all the way. Bein shal cheres, and this is true whether they're made out of earthenware, bein shal matches, or whether they're made out of metal, it doesn't matter. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Haim chaserim, even if the water bottles are not full, you're not allowed to use these kelim that have mayim in them to cool off. V'chol shekein maleim, certainly you can't do this if the kelim are full. Why? Sheyesh locho sheyutazu hamayim olav. Let's say you have a pitcher that's full to the top of water, and you want to take it and put it against your cheek to cool yourself off. Well, we certainly are afraid that the pitcher might overflow, and you're going to end up pouring water on yourself, and that would be a problem of the Yisur Rechitza. So that certainly you're not allowed to do, but the Chiddush is that even if the kelim are not full, you're still not allowed to do this. Okay, now let's continue in the Mechaber. Avalim heim reikim mutter. But if you have a keli that's empty, then you're allowed to use it to cool yourself off. V'chein beperos ubetinoik. So too, you could cool yourself off using some kind of cool fruit, ubetinoik. And with a young child, I don't know exactly what that means, to cool yourself off with a young child, but so be it. That's what the Mechaber says. Okay. Weiter, let's see the Ramah. Hago. Va'aser lishrais mapa miba'oid yom. You're not allowed to soak a towel before Yom Kippur, on Erev Yom Kippur, before the Zman. V'la'asoisa kibin kelim neguvim, and then to cause it to dry out, ulehitstanin ba b'Yom Kippur, and then use it to cool off on Yom Kippur. What we're speaking about is, you want to take a towel, you want to soak it in cold water before the Siman and Erev Yom Kippur. Then you're going to take it out of the water, and you're going to let it dry out. But even on Yom Kippur, tomorrow on Yom Kippur, it'll still be damp and cool. And you want to use that damp, cool towel to cool yourself off. That, the Ramah says, is asr. Why? The Chayshinon, because we must be concerned, Shema loy tinogev yafe, maybe it will not dry out well, v'yavai lidei schita, and then by handling it on Yom Kippur, you might be over on schita. You might squeeze liquid out of the towel. Continues the Ramah, an individual is ill, he could wash himself in the normal way, even if he's not a choyle sheyesh by sakana. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Chavhei. The problem with preparing that cold towel on Erev Yom Kippur is it might not be dried sufficiently, and then when you handle it on Yom Kippur, you might be over on the malach of schita. Aval, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, moto lekaneach yodav v'raglov Erev Yom Kippur b'mapa. You're allowed to use a towel, a wet towel on Erev Yom Kippur to wipe down your hands, your feet. Ulamachar ma'avira al inav, and then the next day you could use it to pass it over your eyes. Tehi adayin lecha k'tas mikiduach yadayim de esmoil, because it still has some dampness from when you used it on Erev Yom Kippur to wipe your hands. Now that I'm looking at this Mishnah Berurah, I think I misinterpreted this Mishnah Berurah when I prepared the shiur. I thought it meant that he could soak a towel, use it for his hands and feet on Erev Yom Kippur, and then use it for his eyes on Yom Kippur. It can't mean that, because that would be no different than the case earlier, where you soaked the towel on Erev Yom Kippur. I think what he means over here is, you took a shower on Erev Yom Kippur, and you washed your face, you washed your hands, you washed your feet, and then you took a bath towel, and you dried your hands, your feet, and your hands. Now, that bath towel is going to be damp. You could use that damp bath towel on Yom Kippur to rub your eyes with it, to clean your eyes, to wipe down your eyes a little bit. Why? Because we don't have to worry about schita. That towel is not going to be wet enough that there's going to be a schita issue. Okay, Sif Yud. Sif Yud. I'm just checking the battery here on my laptop. We should make it. Okay. Sif Yud. Kala kol shloishim yom muteres l'rchaitz paneha. A kala, for the first 30 days after her chasana, she's allowed to wash her face even on Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah Berurah is katan chavav. Kol shloishim yom achar nisueha. For 30 days after her chasana, she's allowed to wash her face, so that she should not appear repulsive in the eyes of her husband. 30 days, the first 30 days of marriage, we want the chassan to look at his wife and see how beautiful his wife is. We don't want him to look at his wife and see something repulsive that early on in marriage. Kasav HaChayadam, Nira Shezeh Haya Bizmanehem. The Chayadam says this was in those days, Shaloi Hayu Bebeis HaKnesses Kol Hayom, where the Yom Kippur davening was not as lengthy as it is now. So the chassan actually came home from shul at some point and saw his wife. Nowadays, when basically you say goodbye to your wife in the morning, Yom Kippur morning, and you don't see her until Matzah Yom Kippur, says the Chavetz Chaim, I didn't hear that anybody is noig such a heter, because the chassan is not going to see the kala anyway, so what's the problem? Sif Yud Aleph. Mi shara kari b'zman hazeh b'yom kippurim. If somebody experienced a seminal emission Yom Kippur at night, he became a balkari Yom Kippur at night. Im lachu, if the zera that's now on his guf is moist, so mekanchei b'mapa v'dayoy, he could just wipe it off himself in preparation for tefillah. He doesn't want to go to davening. He doesn't want to go into davening with the keri wet on his body, so he could wipe it off with a towel. V'im yaveshu oishan islach lech. If it's in one spot and it's dry, Oishin is slachlech, or it got over him in different places. Roichetz mekaimais hamalach lachem by levad or mispalel. He could wash the areas that became dirtied by the zera, because why not? It's the same thing as the case at Sif Aleph. Yadayim melachlachais. If you're washing because your hands are dirty, if you're washing because your face is dirty or your body is dirty, you're allowed to wash off the place that's dirty. That's not a rechitza shel tainug. That's a rechitza because of lichluch. So this carry is the same thing. You want to wash it off. The mekaimais hamalachlachim, you're allowed to wash. But, says the Mechaber, however, he cannot wash his entire body, and certainly he cannot go to the mikveh. He can't say he's a balkari, he wants to go to the mikveh Yom Kippur morning before he goes into davening. No, there's an Isser Rechitza on Yom Kippur. And this is true even if it's somebody who always goes to the mikveh before he davens, if he happens to be a balkari. He's still not allowed to go on Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if it's dry or he got dirty. What the Mechaber means to say is, he became a balkari and it went on him in different places on his guf. It's not just isolated in one spot. He could wash the places that became dirtied. He could wash it off using a wet hand, but not with something like a washcloth, because that would cause a schita problem. He is not allowed to wash his entire body. He can't wash any other area of his body. He also would not be allowed to pour Tisha Kabin of water over himself, which works the same way a mikveh does. Even if he's always in the practice of doing this when he's a balkari on Yom Kippurim, this is also because of rechitza. Why is this so? Because halacha lamaisa, the halacha is that nowadays Ein tzarech tefillah l'balkari midina. Halacha l'maisa, we paskin that a balkari is not mechuyev to go to the mikveh, loy l'divrei Torah, not to learn Torah, v'loy l'tefillah, and not to daven, k'dela'el b'simin peches. And therefore, the fact that he became a balkari does not give him a heter to go to the mikveh to become tar from his kari, because halacha l'maisa, we paskin that we don't need tefillas Ezra. Ve'en lahater b'shum zeh iser rechitza. Siv Yud Beis. Bezman hazeh, nowadays, also l'isha litpail b'Yom Kippurim, it is forbidden for a woman to go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur, afilu higia zman tfilasa b'yom, even if the day of Yom Kippur is the zman for her tefillah shel mitzvah, she's not allowed to go to the mikveh on Yom Kippur. Obviously, she can't do it in order to make herself tar, to have marital relations with her husband, because Tashmish Amit is also on Yom Kippur. But, says the Mishnah Berurah here, she's not allowed to go to the mikvah on Yom Kippur, even if she's not doing it l'shem Tashmish. She just wants to be tar, she doesn't want to be tamei. Gam kein aser, that's still aser. A woman who is in the 7 days of Shiva Nikiyim, and she wears white during her Shiva Nikiyim on Yom Kippur, she's allowed to wash herself somewhat in the makam of the erva. She's allowed to cleanse herself so that she shouldn't have a shiloh of a kesem. She should not use a washcloth because that would be a schita problem. She should just use a wet hand. So she shouldn't arrive at a schita problem. So concludes Siman Taf Reish Yud Gimel. And thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shem should send Yeshua's and Fuz and Parnasa to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to see the B'yas Kal Tzedek B'meher of Yameinu. I'm talking fast because I want to beat out my laptop battery, which is about to die. Be well.